Well, I'd like to ask a question this morning, a question that seems quite obvious in a sense, but do you love the church? We're going to see from 1 Thessalonians as we look through it, a man there who had a real passion for the church. But let me start by just telling you a story of a man called D.L. Moody. Many of you may have heard of him, but if you haven't, he was an American evangelist. And he was working around the 1830s, 40s and 50s, so quite a long time ago. But on one of his trips to the UK, he was staying in London when 3 ministers came to visit him, and they wanted to know why was this man so successful. He was a fairly uneducated man, and yet he led many thousands to come to know Jesus as their Lord and Saviour. And so when they got to the hotel, Moody invited them to go and have a look at the window. And the window of his hotel looked over at the local park. And as they looked out, Moody said, "Just tell me what you see there." And they looked out and they said, "Well, there's people walking up and down. There's mothers pushing prams. People sat on the seats talking." And then Moody went to the window. And as he looked out, it's recalled that he started crying. His tears came down his face. And one of the men there said, "What are you seeing?" And Moody said, "I'm seeing thousands of souls who are going to hell unless they get to know about Jesus." You see, Moody had a different approach to what he saw in people. He may have been poorly educated, but he had the gift of winning men and women for Christ because he had a deep passion to save them. He had a deep longing that they should be moved from an eternity in hell to one in heaven. Sometimes it's not the cleverest people, is it, who have the most insight. Sometimes it's the ones with the least education who can just see and feel a passion for other people and a need to save them. You may have sometimes thought when somebody's asked you to do something in church and you say, "Oh no, I can't do that. I'm not clever enough. I don't have those skills." And yet, you know, when God calls you to do a work, the Bible tells us he equips us as well. So we should never say we can't do something. Here was Moody, who had very poor education, and yet was able to lead thousands to Christ during his lifetime. Our text this morning just is a great example of another person who had that great love for the church and for God's people. I'm referring, of course, to the Apostle Paul. He's writing to encourage this young church. It was a very, very young church in Thessalonica. But he was encouraging them. But I think we can use this passage today to just encourage each one of us in our walk with the Lord and our love for the church. You see, in this portion of the scriptures we read this morning, we can see just how much care Paul had for this church. We get a glimpse into his heart and into his longings for these people. So let's just walk through this passage very, very simply this morning. I just have 5 very short and very simple points just to raise from these verses we read together. The first one is those who love the church are willing to suffer willingly for that church. In verse 1 we read, "You know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results. We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi. As you know, but with the help of our God, we dare to tell you his gospel in the face of strong opposition." Paul and Silas had seen much success in this church in Thessalonica. People, many thousands of people, it would seem, turned from idols and trusted God in a new and an exciting way. And the word of that church spread throughout the whole of that area. So much so that we read again that Paul suffered great persecution because of his ministry there at that time. Just before they arrived, we read that Paul and Silas had been seized, they'd been beaten, they'd been imprisoned. They endured great persecution because of their work for Christ. Paul faced opposition and persecution throughout the whole of his ministry, throughout the whole of his life. And yet he was always willing to suffer because of the sake of the gospel, so that others that might have that opportunity to know Jesus as their Lord and Saviour. You know, we have tremendous freedom, don't we, in this land of ours. We don't face that same persecution. We can meet without fear of being arrested, beaten, or thrown in prison. But you know, in many places around this world, that's exactly what Christians are facing this morning, isn't it? Many are being put in great danger and put into prison or tortured. Many are even being put to death because of their faith. And we might just wonder, why do these people do that? Why do they put their families through persecution and hardship and in danger? Why do they risk death themselves? Well, they do it because they love the Lord and they love his church and they love his people. Countless souls have paid that ultimate sacrifice of dying for their faith in the Lord. And as followers of Jesus, we should love our Saviour so much we'd be willing to go to those lengths if we're called to. But you see, Paul loved Jesus so much, and he loved the church, that he was willing to put up with all sorts of illness and hardship and even death in the end, because of the sake of the gospel and the spread of the gospel. So we need to be willing to suffer for the Lord if we're called to do so. Secondly, Paul, those who love the church will evangelize and do it passionately. Paul was a great preacher, great passionate man, a man who just longed to tell people about the Lord. His goal, you see, was to bring unbelievers into a relationship with the living Christ. He and Silas were called and commissioned to go and share the good news of Jesus Christ around the world. Their ultimate desire was to please God, not men. Notice what Paul says in verse 4. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We're not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts. Sadly, just as in Paul's day, many today preach what they think people want to hear. But that wasn't Paul's way of doing things. He told them what they needed to know. He had a passion to share Christ. It was a great responsibility and privilege that Paul shared and had. He'd been sent out as an ambassador of Christ. And we possess that same responsibility as Christians. We're called to be ambassadors for Christ wherever he's placed us. Paul and Silas, we see, evangelized with great passion and concern. One of the motives for their concern they had for the people and for the lost. We should have that same concern, shouldn't we, as we see people day by day, people who don't know God, who according to the Bible are going to a Christless eternity. If we truly believe in heaven, then we have to believe in hell and judgment too. And we should do all we can to warn the lost of their great need of a Saviour and of a Lord and Saviour. You know, as Christians, we've been delivered from the wrath to come We've been saved by grace. But when we look around, as I say, many of our neighbours and friends and loved ones, they may not have been saved. And they're heading for that lost eternity. We should have enough concern to want to tell them of a better way, the only way, in Jesus. We should always be ready to share the good news with those we come into contact with, never to be shy at coming forward, if you like, in telling people about Jesus. The third point we see in these few verses, those who love the church will labour enthusiastically. In verse 5 onwards, we read this: "You know we never used flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We are not looking for praise of men, not from you or anyone else. As apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority, but we were gentle among you, like a mother caring for her young children. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." You see, in those days, as today, there are many false teachers who are driven by greed. They would tickle the people's ears in order to get into their pockets. And this is an issue that remains even today, isn't it? We have to be very careful who we listen to, what sort of gospel we're hearing. Some people pretend to be apostles and preachers of Christ, but in reality they're just trying to line their own pockets. Be warned. But you see, here Paul was saying he didn't try to win these people over with flattering words. He survived of what he earned. He didn't try to sponge off anyone. He carried on with his task and his jobs, provided by his own hands and the help of the Philippian believers. See, Paul wasn't there for the money or for the fame or anything like that. He was there because he had a compassion and a love for the people. He was there because he had a heart for the church and a desire to see it grow. He cared enough to be willing to labour hard amongst them and to be with them. You know, his labour was physically hard and it was spiritually hard as well, wasn't it? It took a lot out of him. And yet, you see, Paul was willing to do whatever it was necessary to reach those people who are going to a lost eternity. Each one of us, we have ample opportunity, don't we, to reach people for Christ. We encounter different people every day of our lives on a daily basis. And you know, we should be doing all we can to share the good news with those we meet. Perhaps when we go to help someone, by helping them and working with them, we show that love of Christ to each one of them. And we have that opportunity then to share a word, perhaps. Jesus is good news to all people. If you say that you love the Lord and his church, then we must be willing to work enthusiastically for him and be willing to share the truth with those around us. The fourth point I just want to raise and bring up this morning, those who love the church will live honourable lives. You are witnesses, Paul says in verse 10, and so is God, of how holy, righteous and blameless we were among you who believe. Our lives should reflect the faith we have in Christ. Paul had great confidence in the manner in which he and Silas had lived among these people. He says, you saw it with your own eyes, and God is my witness that we lived holy lives when we were among you. Paul and his friends were visual examples of a holy living for Christ. In 1 Peter in chapter 1 and verse 16, it says, "Be holy, for I am holy." We are God's children, and because of that relationship, we should always strive to live as Christ would want us to live. We identify as God's people. Many people say they have a heart for the church, but their actions seem to be more to harm the church than to do good. If we're part of the Church of Christ, then our lives should reflect in the way we live, the way we act, the way we behave with one another and with people around us. We want to live honourable lives to reflect Christ in us. And then lastly, those who have a heart for the church will invest completely. And verse 11 there, "For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory." See, Paul didn't just tell these people about Jesus. He didn't stop just when they became Christians and put their faith in Christ. Paul continued to invest in their lives. That was the reason he wrote this letter to them, to try and encourage them on and to disciple them. He wasn't able to go physically there at that time, so he sent this letter as an encouragement to show them the way they should be living and to encourage them to go on. You see, his desire was for them to grow in faith and to live lives that were pleasing to God, that other people might come to Christ through their witness. Paul had invested much time and effort, and yet and he had many other responsibilities, of course, to all the other churches he'd started. But through it all, he took time to minister to these young Christians, to encourage them and to move on. And we too must have that same example, shouldn't we? We should be encouraging each other, helping each other to grow in their faith and their walk with God, looking after those who are weaker and needing help. Jesus said in that Great Commission, "Go and teach them all things he has commanded us." Paul didn't just stop at conversion. He went on to teach them how to live godly lives. And we are called too, aren't we, to make disciples, to bring people into the kingdom and then carry on to grow them on. In doing so, we may have to suffer. If so, we should do it willingly. We must have passion to share Christ with those around us. It requires us to labour and be working hard and serving with great enthusiasm. We must serve others. We must love others so that we can tell them about Jesus. Each one of us, we're surrounded, aren't we, by the lost. People who don't know Jesus yet. People who may die and one day go to hell because we've kept our mouths shut. We need to talk, don't we? We need to share the faith we have, the salvation we enjoy with those around us. You know, in order for us to be effective in our witness and to win people for Christ, we need to do all we can, don't we? We need to live on honourable lives so people can see a difference in us. We witness the great honour of being called men and women of God. Like Paul and Silas, we need to love the Lord and love his church. Do we love the church? Do we love the church as much as Paul did? Do we love the church as much as Jesus does? Well, I pray that we will. Well, we're going to sing our closing hymn now. All over the world, the Spirit is moving. And then I'll come back and just close in prayer.